Hello, how you doing? It's just a couple of minutes past 9 o'clock. Sorry, I'm a wee bit late. I was practicing my Derry accent for the reading tonight. I got a bit carried away. So anyway, it's just after 9 o'clock, and hope you're safe and well wherever you are. And while we're living through these extraordinary times, I'm doing a sort of a Belfast bedtime book reading every evening at this time, and I've been working my way through my coming of age memoirs, Paperboy, Bread Boy, and All Grown Up. And we're now on All Grown Up. And it's 1982, and I'm a student at university. And we're up to chapter 12 already, would you believe? And so this chapter, it's a mixture of student politics and romance. And Big Isabel, my granny. That's a force to be reckoned with. So that's what I'm going to be reading about this evening. And I'll stop in the middle to say hello to people who are sending greetings in the chat as we go along. So chapter 12 of All Grown Up, War and Peace. That woman! Conor O'Neill was on his soapbox again in the student union, in the cafe where I was having a cup of coffee and a Kit Kat. Ooh, Thatcher! Ooh! He was going very red in the face as usual. I marvelled at Margaret Thatcher's ability to influence Conor's blood pressure. The very mention of her name set him off on a rant that usually concluded with a close comparison between Mrs. Thatcher and Adolf Hitler. That woman, he fumed. They voted her in once, they voted her in again, and they'll keep on voting in the witch forever. At the next table, there were nods of agreement over paper plates of limp ham sandwiches. Encouraged, Conor drew breath and issued the prophecy, "We'll never get rid of that bloody woman." Well, is that not democracy? I ventured. I was almost confident now, and I was prepared to question the unquestionable. Conor turned around slowly and surveyed me with as much suspicion as Dr. McCoy scanning an alien life form with impossibly blonde hair in Star Trek. All right, so do you support her? Do you? This allegation was almost as bad as the accusation of being middle class. I didn't like Margaret Thatcher because she seemed to care more about always being right than always doing the right thing. I didn't say I supported her, I just said that's democracy. If most people vote for her, then she gets elected as Prime Minister. Suddenly, Marty Mullen from Derry swiveled around on his plastic chair at a table across the room, scattering plastic cutlery and the remains of a rubbery sausage roll. Well, with the Armalite in one hand, and the ballot box in the other, Thatcher will be thrown out of Ireland, and we will be a nation once again, in a free socialist republic. Marty chimed triumphantly as he dipped a piece of Twix in his tea. Several of Marty's clones nodded solemnly. Violence achieves nothing, I said, aware that I sounded like John Hume. It just hurts people and makes everything worse. Marty sighed aggressively. I was daring to contradict the most uncontradictable person that I had ever met. I was surprised by how confident I had become. That's just your middle-class Protestant values, Marty retorted. In my first year at university, I had been accused of being middle-class so many times that during the summer break, I decided to double-check with my father if it was possible that we were, in fact, lower middle class rather than working class. There's nothing middle class about us, son, he reassured me. Are we not maybe upper working class? I asked. If anything, we're lower working class, and don't you forget it. Well, do you think we might be upper lower working class? No son of mine is going to think he's middle class when he's not, he firmly replied. So I was ready for this argument. I'm not middle class. You're actually talking arrant nonsense, I protested, instantly realizing that what I just said sounded very middle class indeed. I'm a socialist, so I am. Belfast Royal Academy and not middle class, said Marty, barking with a derisory laugh. Wise up, wee lad. There's nothing socialist about you. You're just one more part of the capitalist war machine in the 6 counties. Just admit it, will ye? Hold your horses, wee lad, I argued back for once. I'm a pacifist. I'm no part of no war machine, so I'm not. Killing people just breaks hearts. The families will never forgive you, you know. I tell that to the fucking Brits, Marty hissed. I said killing breaks hearts. That's anyone killing people. As long as it's your side doing the killing, you think it's all right, don't you? If my confidence grew any further, I might get myself into trouble and become a legitimate target. Pure, airy, fairy, middle-class shite, said Marty Mullen. I'd never heard anyone say airy fairy in a Derry accent before. And it almost ruined the argument because I nearly burst out laughing. My dad works in a foundry on the Springfield Road in West Belfast. There's nothing middle class about me, I protested. Oh, aye, jobs for the boys, replied Marty. Where's the jobs for all the Catholics west of the Ban, eh? Marty ended every argument by saying everything that happened in the world was unfair to the people who lived west of the River Ban. It was true that the worst employment was always in Strabane and Derry, so I couldn't really argue with them. But I was certain there must be some good things west of the Ban. But Marty Mullen wasn't one of them. He seemed to resent me just for being me, and he disliked me for coming from where I came from, and I couldn't change any of that. But just as Marty was about to launch into another assault on my socialist credentials, Connor opened up an attack on another front. Speaking of democracy, I think your precious Christian Union should be banned from the Students' Union altogether. What? It's a completely undemocratic organisation. Union? My arse. Excuse me, what? The Students' Union should only allow clubs that are open to everyone and exclude people who aren't the right type of super Christian, argued Connor. Wise up, wee lad, I said. Sure, the women's group have to be women, and the socialist group have to be socialists. So why can't the Christian Union be Christians? But them other groups are not part of the capitalist patriarchy headed by that woman. Now I was in my second year at university. I was getting really tired of all these arguments over politics and ideology. We said the same things over and over again, and no one ever changed their mind, and I always ended up feeling crap. I understood this type of intellectual debate was expected of students, but sometimes I just wanted to forget about sorting out the world's problems. I wanted to leave my books in the university library and go home to Belfast and watch a good episode of Doctor Who, like the one where the Doctor had to decide whether or not to go back in time and commit genocide on the Daleks by blowing them all up before they could ever exterminate anyone. The Doctor himself had regenerated as a vet who liked cricket and celery, and the long scarf was gone forever. The new, younger Doctor Who ran up and down spaceship corridors and climbed through ventilation shafts with. He seemed to hate violence as much as I did. Right, I'm away to meet my girlfriend, I said, getting up to leave the debate. No one said so much as a goodbye or see you later. There was no interest whatsoever in my new relationship. Even though I'd known them all for over a year now, Connor and Marty simply ignored me, and Connor started ranting on again about how that woman was out to destroy the unions and the National Health Service and the world. Sometimes I felt very lonely at university with my fellow socialists. So anyway, I'm going to take a wee break there and say hello. Good evening, Jim Poole. How you doing? Never misses. Great to have you, Jim. Hi, Alan McLean. That'll be another Redner. Yeah, maybe later on there'll be a bit of a Redner, Alan. Although I hope you enjoyed that little reference to Peter Davison's Doctor Who. Hello there, Betty O'Riordan. Good evening. How you doing? Evening, Evelyn Brown. Hi, Norma Fleming. Hello, Francis McGrath. Evening, Tony. Thoroughly enjoying All Growed Up, says Angela and Keith. Angela and Keith Montgomery, never miss. Hi, Neve Sahafi, another regular. Hope you're doing well there, Neve. Good evening, Norma Sloan. Hope all is good with you. Anne Kirk says, hi, Tony. Couldn't stop laughing at last night's chapter. It was so funny. Oh, yeah, the joke was on me, no doubt. That was a bit embarrassing, but there you go. Glad you enjoyed it. Good evening, Marlene Williamson and Michael McKinley Sr. Good to have you, Michael. Hi, Aline Bonner. Hope you're all well too. Good evening, Brendan Toll. How you doing? Mark McCauley says, appreciate your non-violent message in these current times of distress. Thanks, Tony. Yeah, it's like non-violence to me, it's a message for all ages. Hi, Tony, says Karen Shire. I loved last night's stories of the foreign trips of the Westie Disco on tour. Hilarious as always. Thank you. Anne writing, know what you stand for and stand for what you know. Advice from my Belfast dad. That's good, sensible Belfast wisdom there from your father, Anne. A wee bit late, Susan, but yeah, glad you're with me. Hi, Sabina in Germany. Lovely to have you along. Sabina, hope you're doing well. Hope you're all well over there. Evening, Orla O'Sullivan. Hope you're all doing well there as well. Hi, Norma Soon. Yeah, indeed. It's great. Oh, I'm glad you're joining and all enjoying it. So, I'm going to continue with the story. So I'm back at university. As I walked along the longest bus shelter in the world, the now familiar gusts of wind blew icy rain into my face. I had walked along this passageway hundreds of times in the past year. Hey boy, what's the crack, hey? Said Billy Barton as he passed me en route to the library. There was very little crack, so I replied curtly with my customary greeting, right? Then felt weak because Billy looked offended and he was a right fella. Now that I was a second year, I knew my way around the university and I knew lots of people, but on days like this, I still didn't feel as if I truly belonged there. To prove our maturity now that we were second year students, Aaron and I decided to move out of Mrs. Flood's bed and breakfast and into a rented house at the harbour with 3 other lads and no heating. My tiny bedroom was in the attic, but on stormy nights, the saltwater spray from the waves crashing over the harbour wall still reached my dormer window at the very top of the house. I sometimes opened the window during a storm and stuck my tongue out just to taste the salt water. It was very grown up to have your own place with other students who didn't want to do the dishes either. But after a few months, I longed for a return to the warmth of Mrs. Flood's house with her cute dogs and her friendly daughter and a chicken dinner in the evening. When I reached the central buildings, there was a poster on the notice board advertising auditions for a new student production of Hamlet. This momentarily lifted my spirits. Maybe if I joined the Drama Society and got the part of Hamlet, I would feel more like a part of this place. I bumped into Tara Grace on the stairs and she asked me to pray for a girl on her course to be healed from her migraines, as this would be really just kind of beautiful. When I agreed to add my supplications to her prayer, she shrieked, "Praise Jesus!" just a little too loudly for my comfort outside the confines of LT17. When I arrived at the model, there was no sign of Leslie yet, but Byron Drake and Aaron Ward were sitting under the stairs with their eyes closed and their headphones on, listening to their Sony Walkmans. I knew not to disturb Aaron because he had just bought the new Dire Straits album and got very grumpy if you interrupted him during private investigations. And this particular song went on forever. So I lifted Byron's Guardian and confidently slapped him across the back of the head. "Hey, Tone, leave it out," he said. "What are you listening to now?" I inquired. "The greatest band of all time," Byron answered. "ABBA, really?" "Very droll, Tone, very droll." "It's your man with the gladiola in his back pocket, isn't it?" I was correct, of course. "Listen, Tone, this man Morrissey is pure genius. His music is really, really dark and really, really deep. It's almost Nietzschean." But it's dead depressing and you can't sing along to it, so you can't. I dare to disagree. Listen, Tone, the Smiths are not like all that pretentious new romantic crap that you listen to. There's nothing pretentious about Morrissey. Byron had spoken on a matter of art and culture, and I dared not dispute any further. What are you reading these days, Tone? I was reading a Doctor Who novel called The Tomb of the Cybermen and Basic Christianity by John Stott. Oh, I'm still reading War and Peace, so I am, I replied. It's really, really long. I'd given up trying to finish the book and it was costing me a fortune in fines at the Shankill Library. Until you have read The Catcher in the Rye, you haven't read anything, said Byron. Some days, Byron carried this slim book alongside his Guardian, so I decided perhaps I should give it a wee read at some stage. I'm going to audition for Hamlet with the Drama Society, I announced. Good for you, Tone. Nothing like a good bit of Billy Shaky. I dead on. But do you know you have to be able to act to perform the bard? At this point, I felt compelled to explain to Byron that I was in fact an accomplished actor in the mould of Roger Moore, having studied Roger's on-screen techniques in Octopussy at the Coleraine Palladium. I informed Byron Drake that I had triumphed on the stage at Belfast Royal Academy's groundbreaking production of West Side Story, and that I would take the transition from West Side Story to Hamlet in my stride. Byron opened up his Guardian and turned up the volume of The Smiths. Anyway, I'm meeting my new girlfriend here, and we're going for lunch in the canteen, I explained. Said Byron, are you going for a virgin tea party? Throwing one end of his Yasser Arafat scarf over his shoulder. Very funny. When I was in Torremolinos, Swedish girls were throwing themselves at me, you know. When was the last time you had a girlfriend? Listen, Tone, I know how to pleasure a woman. I can bring a woman to pure ecstasy within minutes. Oh, do you take her shopping to Anderson Macaulay's in Royal Avenue? Interrupted Leslie in her familiar Balaki whoop. If Byron was expecting my girlfriend to be a wee mousy good living girl, he was in for a surprise. Well, are we going for lunch or not? Asked Leslie, who was resplendent in her bright blue Dash tracksuit from Anderson Macaulay's itself. Are you Tony's girlfriend? Asked Byron. He's Leslie's boyfriend, Leslie answered. You've no idea. Good luck with that, Tone, said Byron. We left Byron and Aaron still entranced by an endless Mark Knopfler guitar solo to their music and made our way past the model of the university, along the corridor with the shop and the oversized pot plants and past the bank. As we walked hand in hand towards the canteen, I noticed that Leslie and I were wearing matching leg warmers, like a couple from the Kids from Fame. I was in the port on Sunday night, driving up and down in the prom in my car, and you've no idea, said Leslie. I saw these boys with a brand new XR3 and alloys and all, and I was raging because I wanted one of them cars for years, and when they drove past me and tooted the horn, it just made me even more worse. Leslie effused. Cars are for capitalists, I interjected. I know, but the XR3 is lovely. It's gorgeous. When you drive a good car, it becomes part of your body. I'd never thought of a car in this way before, and I wasn't sure if I wanted my father's green Simca to become a part of my body. So when are you taking me down to Belfast? Asked Leslie. Soon. I just have to arrange it with my mommy because my granny hasn't been too well with her pains and her nerves and all. Will you show me all the wee red brick houses where yous all live? We don't all live in those wee streets, you know. Sometimes you can be so middle class. What's wrong with that? Asked Leslie. Well, you know I'm a socialist, don't you? Well, what does that mean anyway? Leslie knew very well that socialists were because her degree was in social administration. I had a feeling that my girlfriend was secretly trying to test me. It means, well, it means that I believe in the redistribution of wealth so that resources are shared equally and not kept by the richest people like the bourgeoisie in Thatcher's Britain. Leslie yawned. You see, you're not even interested, I said. Oh, my nerves! While I'm in the library writing essays on prison reform, you're saving the world by watching movies. Leslie was good at irony. If you really believe in socialism, why don't you redistribute your own wealth? She challenged. Well, I've only got £50 in my Abbey National Savings account, but I was saving that to buy a bike for uni. So you're not going to redistribute your wealth to anybody then? Asked Leslie. Some socialist you are. You just don't like socialism because of your pony and your middle-class values, I said, drawing upon my recent exchanges with Connor and Marty. What about the people west of the Bann? I said. Leslie stopped walking and looked at me in disbelief. I've lived west of the Bann all my life. You've no idea, said Leslie. What? Ballachy is west of the Bann, you know, she explained. But you don't complain all the time, I said. Leslie rolled her eyes and moved up on to more important matters. Do you like my new red lipstick? She asked. The next weekend, when I was at home in Belfast, I withdrew the £50 from my Abbey National Savings account and bought a second-hand bike in Smithfield Market. I had never owned a brand new bike in my life. Even Santa Claus had brought me a second-hand bicycle down the chimney when I was a wee boy, and there was nothing middle class about that. The bike itself cost £45, and with the remaining £5, I bought a puncture repair kit and a brand new innovation called a bicycle radio. This was basically a battery-operated transistor radio that you attached to your handlebars. The gadget worked very well in the shop, but when I switched on Radio 1 while cycling, the sound of the wind and the traffic drowned out Karma 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 Chameleon. This made it frustratingly difficult to sing along to Culture Club, which you would never do on the Ballygamartin Road anyway, in case we hood spotted you and beat you up for being gay. Then, one day in heavy rain, the radio short-circuited halfway through Kajagoogoo, and that was the end of it. One Sunday night, I put my bike on board the train at Central Station to convey my new mode of transport up to Coleraine. Now that I was in second year, I would be a fully independent traveller with my own set of wheels. I no longer depended on Aaron for lifts to and from university, so he could no longer complain about me not giving him petrol money because I was as tight as a duck's arse. When the train arrived in Coleraine that night, though, I realised that I would have to cycle home in the dark, and I had not made provisions for the unrelenting Atlantic wind and rain. I thought the 3-mile journey would be easy on my new wheels. But when I set out, I discovered there were more hills to climb than I had previously realised. The bike had 3 gears, but this didn't help, and I had a sports bag full of tinned baked beans on my back to feed me for the week. I was no athlete, but I was shocked that I'd neither the endurance nor the leg power to sustain me on this short journey. I'd forgotten to buy a pair of bicycle clips, and when I noticed the oil from the chain was rubbing onto my leg warmers, I had to stop to take them off and tuck my combat trousers down my socks. Sheets of icy rain were blowing into my face, as if the universe was giving me another good slap. And I couldn't help but wonder why I couldn't have my own wee car, like Leslie and Aaron did. I would have been quite happy to be called middle class if it meant I could drive my own wee mini metro to and from university and play ABBA's Greatest Hits Volume 2 on the cassette machine on my very own dashboard. As I made my way up the steepest hill of the journey, I began to shed unexpected tears of frustration. I was trying to do my best with the resources I had, so how come my best was never enough? Why did everything have to be such a struggle? When I finally arrived at my freezing house, soaked to the skin and upset, I collapsed straight into my sleeping bag and pulled the blankets over my head to keep out the cold and the world. I wanted to escape from reality, and within minutes, I was in a deep sleep and dreaming that I was Luke Skywalker rescuing Han Solo from Jabba the Hutt. A few weeks later, however, Leslie came to visit me in Belfast for the first time. I provided her with a detailed set of directions to guide her from the motorway to the Upper Shankill via the streets with the fewest bricked up properties. Leslie arrived exactly on time and parked her Ford Escort estate outside our house, dwarfing the green Simca in the process. As it was a Saturday morning, my brothers were both out playing sports and overachieving with balls. So only my parents were at Shea Macaulay to greet Leslie from up the country. I was nervous. What if Leslie thought our house wasn't swanky enough? What if Leslie didn't like my parents? What if Betty and Eric didn't like Leslie? What if Leslie told my father about winning trophies at gymkhanas? What if my father told Leslie that Christianity was just a load of old fairy stories? What if Leslie realised that I was just a wee fella from up the Shankill and decided to chuck me? My father decided to welcome our guest from up the country with his signature Ulster fry, complete with extra potato bread from the Ormo mini shop. My mother put a tablecloth and placemats on the Formica table in the living room for this special occasion. Mummy welcomed Leslie in her Gloria Honeyford telephone voice. But when she heard that Leslie had a pronounced country accent, she relaxed and spoke normally. Leslie was wearing a teal designer tracksuit from Anderson Macaulay's that my mother said was lovely on her. My father told Leslie that he used to go fishing for eels near Balachi. Leslie explained that her mother was a primary school headmistress, which impressed my mother, and her father was a building contractor, which impressed my father. When it emerged that Leslie was a good Presbyterian, even though she was from Balachi, there was a sense of relief all round. The meal proceeded without incident, even though Leslie declined the offer of an extra sausage and a Paris bun. I was relieved that everyone got on so well together, in spite of the dangerous class divide between us. After our Ulster fry, I took Leslie out in the green Simca for a grand tour of Belfast. I showed her the Nissen Hut where the Westie Disco took place on a Saturday night. "That there's the Westie Disco," I said excitedly, as if I was a London tour guide pointing out Buckingham Palace. "Is that it?" she asked. Then I took her to Woodvale Park and the Shankill Graveyard, and as promised, showed her a proper Belfast entry behind the red brick terraced houses with the bins out. I took her to Tommy and Peggy Lusty's fish and chip shop for an authentic Shankill Road pasty supper, even though she declined the offer of a pickled egg. Outside the chippy, we bumped into Irene Maxwell and her mommy, who'd been shopping in the very few shops still left on the road. "Hiya, Irene," I said. Irene was a ska girl now and was wearing a Madness t-shirt and too much eyeliner. "Hi, you wee lad," she replied, chewing her Wrigley's gum. Irene looked Leslie up and down, as if she was a judge inspecting a poodle in the Crufts final on BBC Two. "Oh, ye must be thingy," she said to Leslie. "This is Leslie from up the country. She's my girlfriend," I said indignantly. "God love you, Leslie," Irene replied, still looking at me. "You've no idea," said Leslie. Following this encounter, I led Leslie over to the Peace Wall between the falls and the Shankill, and she could hardly believe that people could live like this. We drove up the Falls Road to Andersonstown, where the IRA lived, and I showed her the massive fortified army barracks overlooking the city and the huge housing estates that would swallow all of Balachi. I was certain Leslie was impressed by my lack of fear of being on the other side, but she seemed to take it all in her stride, as if it was quite normal. On the way back, we had to casually drive round a burning car because there'd been trouble the night before. And once we had checked that the Simca's doors were locked, she barely even flinched. Then I brought her up the steep incline of the Glencairn Road for a panoramic view of the city. We passed the glen where I used to catch tadpoles and where the paramilitaries dumped bodies. From this vantage point, you could see the dome of the city hall, Samson and Goliath, the big yellow cranes of the shipyard, the Belfast-Liverpool ferry, Belfast Lough, and some shops that were still smouldering from the latest firebomb in the city centre. I was very proud of Belfast, and I could tell that Leslie was impressed by the city and my big city ways. As we toured the streets of Belfast, Billy Joel came on the radio on the car singing Uptown Girl. This was very appropriate because Leslie was like my uptown girl, except she was from up the country, which meant she was my up the country girl, but I was definitely her downtown man. Finally, we went to visit my granny off the Donegal Road, and I was mighty relieved when the matriarch and my new girl got on famously. God love him, we never knew what our Tony would end up bringing home with him, said my granny. I was slightly offended by this. Och, look at you, son. You're all growed up now with a lovely big girl from up the country and all. I could tell from the size of Leslie's eyes that she'd never been inside such a small house in her life. Granny's terraced house was what Belfast people called a wee kitchen house, with just one main room downstairs with a working kitchen. Look at the two of yous together, said Granny, looking us up and down. You're a queer couple of smashers, just like our Charles and Diana. I looked at the various plates and mugs featuring Charles and Diana on the mantelpiece, and although I was convinced we looked nothing like the royal couple, I appreciated the sentiment and decided it would not be an appropriate moment to engage in a socialist argument against the monarchy. I was praying that Leslie would refrain from asking Granny if she liked her Gloria Vanderbilt. Granny allowed Leslie to help me clean out the hearth and light the fire, and sent us round to the shop to get her some messages, including a ham shank for her dinner and a prescription from the chemist for ointment. "Och, you're a lovely big girl, so you are," Big Isabel told Leslie. When we said our farewells to Granny, I knew it was time to broach a sensitive issue with Leslie. Remember I showed you that proper Belfast entry with the bins and all this morning? Aye, behind all the wee two up, two down houses, answered Leslie correctly. Well, you're not a proper girlfriend and boyfriend where I come from, unless you've had a snog up an entry on the Shankill Road. No way, Leslie answered coquettishly. Do you really want to kiss me up a bogan entry? Yes, you promised you'd do it if I brought you to Belfast, I said. The frisson of young love was in the air of the Simca as Leslie nodded and I turned on the ignition. I'm going to take you boldly where no wee girl from Balachi has gone before, I said in my best James T. Kirk accent. Well, we'd better hurry up. I'm meeting Mommy and Ballymena at 3 o'clock for there's a big sale on in Googay. We parked the car near the Chinese takeaway that had been closed down for rats, and I led my lover to an entry opposite the Shankill graveyard. With my back to the bins and her lovely hair brushing against the red bricks, I kissed Leslie gently on the neck. We were briefly interrupted by some familiar-looking mods who passed by, singing The Sash and smelling of glue. Yo! They jeered suggestively. Alone once more, we kissed and maintained a passionate embrace for 10 perfect minutes. Just as the entry was beginning to steam up slightly, a woman in a housecoat and hair rollers appeared through her back door. She had a droopy fag hanging from one side of her mouth and her hands on her hips. After briefly surveying our activities, she began shaking her fist and shouting at us, "Away or that with ye, you dirty beasts, she yelled. we were a proper couple now, so we were. There you are. That's Leslie's introduction to life in Belfast in chapter 12 of All Growed Up. So let's just say hello to a few more people who've been sending greetings before I go. Glad you've enjoyed it, Marty McCauley. Susan Wilgar says, I love the view from the Rocky Road. Yeah, it's a lovely view up there too. Almost time for our sleeping bags. Great chapter tonight. Thanks, Susan. Craig. Norma Fleming, you old romantic. There's nothing more romantic than a snog up an entry, Norma. Leslie, the lovely Leslie from up the country says, oh, my nerves. She's hitting her Edna downstairs tonight. Great as usual. Thank you. Tony says Evelyn Brown. Brilliant. Thanks, says Nigel McComb. Wonderful, says Norma. Fantastic, says Orla. Thank you very much, all of you. Oh, lovely. Thank you, says Susan Wilgar. And thanks, says Alan McLean as well. Well, great for having you all with me this evening. I'll be back with the next exciting installment of All Growed Up tomorrow night at 9 o'clock UK time, live on Facebook. Until then, wherever you are, stay safe and stay well and stay positive.